The night was cold, the river dark and silent. Across its waters lay the boundary of the Roman Republic, a line no general had dared to cross. Behind him, the murmurs of the Senate, the politics of Rome, and the fate of thousands weighed heavily on his shoulders. Ahead, the unknown, war, and destiny itself awaited. Then he spoke the words that would echo through history. Alea iacta est. The die is cast. Julius Caesar, triumphant general and master strategist, led his legions across the Rubicon River. With that single act, he defied the Senate, challenged Pompey, and set Rome on the path to civil war. The Republic would never be the same. This is the story of ambition, betrayal, and the fateful choices that reshaped an empire. Part 1. The political storm before the Rubicon. In the years leading up to 49 BC, Rome was a city of intrigue, ambition, and mounting tension. The Republic, with its centuries-old traditions, was under immense strain. Political offices, previously bound by custom and service, had become tools for personal ambition. Wealthy families vied for influence, alliances were made and broken in secret councils, and the balance of power teetered precariously. At the heart of this maelstrom stood Julius Caesar. By the late 50s BC, Caesar had established himself as a brilliant military commander. His conquest of Gaul had not only expanded Rome's territory, but also cemented his reputation as a general of unmatched skill. The legions he commanded were loyal to him personally, not merely to the Senate or the Republic. Every victory brought him wealth, fame, and the admiration of the Roman people, but it also earned him the wary eyes of his political rivals. Among those rivals was Pompey the Great, once an ally of Caesar through the first triumvirate alongside Crassus, but alliances in Rome were fleeting. Crassus's death in 53 BC disrupted the delicate balance of power, leaving Caesar and Pompey on a collision course. The Senate, influenced by Pompey and conservative senators, feared Caesar's growing influence and wealth. They demanded that he disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen, an order that would strip him of his power and leave him vulnerable to political prosecution. For Caesar, the choice was clear yet perilous. To obey the Senate meant risking his life and losing the authority he had earned on distant battlefields. To defy them meant committing an act of rebellion against the very republic he had sworn to protect. The tension in Rome was palpable. Streets buzzed with rumors, senators whispered of coups, and the populace watched anxiously, uncertain what the future would bring. The political climate of Rome at this time was a study in contradictions. On one hand, the Republic prided itself on its laws, its institutions, and the Senate's authority. On the other, it was increasingly governed by ambition, bribery, and the influence of individual generals. Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon was not merely a military maneuver, it was the culmination of years of political erosion, a symbol of the Republic's fragility in the face of personal ambition. Meanwhile, Pompey consolidated his power in Italy, aligning himself with senators who opposed Caesar. He commanded respect, wealth, and influence, yet he lacked the same personal loyalty of troops that Caesar enjoyed. The stage was set for confrontation, not just a battle of armies, but a struggle of wills, ideologies, and the very essence of Roman governance. Caesar, fully aware of the stakes, rallied his closest advisors and trusted officers. They debated, planned, and weighed the consequences. Crossing the Rubicon would be treason by law, yet hesitation could mean losing everything. Historical accounts suggest that Caesar's decision was deliberate, informed by both ambition and a keen understanding of Roman politics. He was a man who measured risk against opportunity, and he knew that the moment demanded action. As winter waned, the Rubicon River became the literal and symbolic boundary of Caesar's defiance. Its waters, though shallow, represented centuries of tradition, law, and the invisible line between private command and rebellion. Caesar's legions stood ready, loyal and disciplined, awaiting their commander's command. The men had marched across the frozen lands of Gaul, fought fierce battles, and now faced a moral and political test. Would they follow him into history, or would fear hold them back? When Caesar finally made the decision to cross, he did so with authority and resolve. The legions followed, the die was cast, and Rome was plunged into a conflict that would determine the fate of the Republic. News of the crossing spread rapidly. Senators fled, alliances shifted, and the city itself braced for war. Caesar's act was more than military yet, was a declaration that the Republic's traditions could be bent by ambition and courage. The civil war that followed was brutal, swift, and decisive. Caesar's strategy, honed in years of conquest, allowed him to advance rapidly, securing key cities and defeating forces loyal to Pompey. Battles such as those at Corfinium, Dyrrhachium, and ultimately Pharsalus demonstrated Caesar's genius, blending speed, discipline, and psychological warfare. Pompey, despite his resources and support, struggled to match Caesar's tactical brilliance. Yet the conflict was not merely about armies and strategy. It was about perception and politics. Caesar presented himself as the protector of Rome, the champion of the people, and a restorer of order. Propaganda, speeches, and letters were employed to justify his actions, painting his rebellion as a necessary step to save the Republic from corruption and tyranny. Meanwhile, Pompey positioned himself as the defender of tradition, appealing to conservative senators and Rome's elite to resist Caesar's advance. The crossing of the Rubicon also reshaped Rome's citizenry. Ordinary Romans watched the unfolding drama with awe, fear, and curiosity. Many who had supported Pompey or remained neutral switched sides. As the momentum of Caesar's campaign became clear, the civil war became not only a test of military might, but also of loyalty, persuasion, and the ability to inspire belief in a vision for Rome's future. By the end of Part 1, the stage is set. Caesar has crossed the Rubicon, defied the Senate, and ignited a civil war that will reshape the destiny of Rome. His audacious choice was a turning point in his career, moment when one man's decision reverberated across an empire, changing the course of governance, power, and society forever. Part 2. The crossing and the spark of civil war. The morning fog clung to the banks of the Rubicon River, its icy waters reflecting the dim light of dawn. Julius Caesar, fully aware of the historical weight of the moment, gave the order that would echo through centuries. His legions began their march across the river, leaving the familiar safety of Cisalpine Gaul behind. Every step carried the potential for treason. Every heartbeat marked the crossing from law-abiding general to rebel of the Republic. Caesar's decision was calculated, yet it required courage of a type rare in history. Behind him stood legions, seasoned by campaigns in Gaul, men loyal not only to their commander, but to the vision he embodied. Their cohesion and discipline were unmatched, forming the foundation upon which Caesar would build his campaign against Pompey and the Senate. Crossing the Rubicon was more than a military maneuver. It was the ignition of a civil war that would determine the fate of Rome itself. The immediate aftermath, news of Caesar's crossing spread like wildfire. Senators fled Rome in fear, abandoning the city to uncertainty. Pompey, stationed in southern Italy with his forces, had to respond quickly. He understood that Caesar's speed and decisiveness were as dangerous as his armies. A delay could mean losing the initiative and risking the collapse of his own influence. Rome's citizens watched anxiously. Many were torn between loyalty to tradition and admiration for Caesar's victories in Gaul. Political discourse turned into rumor and fear. Families debated allegiances. Merchants anticipated disruption. Soldiers prepared for recruitment. In this volatile climate, propaganda became a weapon as powerful as the Gladiators. Caesar sent letters to Rome, framing his march as a necessary act to protect the Republic from corruption. Casting Pompey and his allies as conspirators against the people. Marched to Italy. Caesar's forces moved with astonishing speed, a testament to the general's mastery of logistics and strategy. The roads of northern Italy, though narrow and challenging, became avenues of destiny. Small towns and cities along the route faced the dilemma of resistance or surrender. Many, sensing Caesar's momentum and the loyalty of his troops, capitulated peacefully. preferring accommodation to destruction. Pompey's strategy, by contrast, relied on caution. He sought to consolidate loyal forces, gather reinforcements, and use the Senate's authority to challenge Caesar's legitimacy. Yet this hesitation allowed Caesar to advance, unopposed in many regions, steadily undermining Pompey's political and military position. The early movements of the Civil War illustrated a recurring principle. Boldness often outpaces caution in decisive historical moments. The first confrontations, the first significant encounter occurred at Corfinium. Pompey's forces, numerically superior but less motivated, attempted to halt Caesar's advance. Caesar, known for his tactical brilliance, employed a combination of psychological pressure and strategic negotiation. Instead of immediately attacking, he encircled the city, demonstrating his military dominance while offering leniency to the defenders. Remarkably, many of Pompey's troops surrendered without a fight, swayed by the promise of clemency and loyalty to a general they admired more than their commanders. This victory, achieved with minimal bloodshed, enhanced Caesar's reputation. It sent a powerful message. His civil war was not only about conquest, but also about authority and personal loyalty. Dyrrhachium and the challenge of Pompey. As Caesar advanced south, the conflict intensified. Pompey regrouped in Dyrrhachium, assembling a formidable force of loyalists, allies, and hired mercenaries. The ensuing campaign tested Caesar's tactical ingenuity. At Dyrrhachium, Caesar faced supply shortages, a well-entrenched enemy, and treacherous terrain. A series of skirmishes and blockades strained his forces, challenging the myth of his invincibility. Despite these difficulties, Caesar's ability to inspire loyalty among his troops proved decisive. He motivated his men with speeches emphasizing honor, destiny, and the defense of Rome itself. His leadership transformed ordinary soldiers into instruments of extraordinary action. The battles at Dyrrhachium were not decisive in themselves, but they demonstrated that Caesar could endure adversity, adapt, and emerge stronger. The Battle of Phasaelus, the culmination of the Civil War's first phase, arrived at Phasaelus in 48 BC. Pompey, confident in his superior numbers, sought to deliver a crushing blow to Caesar's forces. Yet Caesar's strategic brilliance turned the tide. He utilized terrain advantage, disciplined formations, and carefully timed reserves to counter Pompey's strength. The battle was brutal and swift. Despite Pompey's numerical superiority, Caesar's legions inflicted devastating losses. Pompey's forces were scattered, morale collapsed, and many defected to Caesar's side. The defeat marked the end of Pompey's immediate challenge to Caesar's authority, forcing him to flee to Egypt in hopes of regrouping. Political and social implications. The Civil War did not end with a single battle. The crossing of the Rubicon had already changed Rome's political landscape irrevocably. Senators who once wielded power now faced the reality of Caesar's military dominance. Cities and provinces had to choose sides, creating a divide that persisted for years. Socially, the war had profound effects. Families were split by allegiances. Economic disruption spread as trade routes were interrupted. The moral authority of the Senate was undermined. Caesar's actions demonstrated that military power could overshadow centuries of republican tradition, highlighting the fragility of political institutions in times of personal ambition. Caesar's leadership and vision. Throughout these campaigns, Caesar's combination of charisma, intelligence, and decisiveness became evident. He understood that civil war was not only fought with armies, but with hearts and minds. Letters to allies, promises of clemency, and careful management of public perception allowed him to consolidate power efficiently. Moreover, Caesar's vision extended beyond immediate victory. He sought to stabilize the republic, reform governance, and ensure his legacy. While his methods were controversial, his awareness of the broader political, social, and historical consequences distinguished him from mere conquerors. The human element. Amid strategy and politics, the human cost of civil war was immense. Soldiers faced exhaustion, uncertainty, and fear. Citizens were forced to navigate a world where loyalty could mean survival or death. Yet Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon was a story of human courage, risk, and the exercise of agency. It serves as a reminder that history is shaped not just by institutions, but by the decisions of individuals willing to act decisively at critical moments. By the end of this phase of the conflict, Caesar had established himself as the dominant figure in Roman politics. The crossing of the Rubicon was no longer a single act, but the opening of a transformative chapter in Roman history, a chapter marked by civil war, the reshaping of governance, and the inexorable march toward empire. Part 3. From Dictatorship to Legacy. Caesar and the Fate of the Republic. The dust of Pharsalus had barely settled when the world began to shift. Pompey, once the undisputed champion of the Senate, fled the battlefield a broken man. His grand strategy, his reputation, and his claim as defender of the Republic lay in ruins. Caesar, with fewer men but greater vision, had triumphed against impossible odds. Yet victory in battle did not mean peace. The Roman Civil War was far from over. It would carry Caesar from Greece to Egypt, from Africa to Spain, until he stood alone as Rome's unrivaled master. But the question loomed: what would he do with such power? The flight and death of Pompey. Pompey's retreat led him across the Mediterranean to Egypt, a kingdom in the grip of its own political turmoil. There, the young pharaoh Ptolemy XIII and his advisors debated how to handle the arrival of Rome. As defeated general, Pompey hoped for asylum, believing that his stature and past alliances would protect him. Instead, he found betrayal. As he stepped onto Egyptian soil, Pompey was assassinated, his body discarded unceremoniously. His killers sought to win Caesar's favor, assuming that the death of his rival would be welcomed. Yet when Caesar arrived days later and was presented with Pompey's severed head, he wept. Whatever rivalries had divided them, Pompey was once a Roman consul, a peer, and the man who had shared power in the first triumvirate. His ignoble death was a stain on Roman dignity. This moment revealed a deeper truth about Caesar. He was ruthless in pursuit of power, but he understood the importance of respect and legacy. His tears for Pompey were not only personal, they were political. Rome would see that Caesar valued clemency and honor, even for defeated enemies. Cleopatra and the Egyptian campaign. Egypt, however, became more than a footnote in Caesar's story. It was here that he met Cleopatra VII, the brilliant and ambitious queen locked in a struggle with her brother for the throne. Their partnership, part political alliance, part love affair, altered the course of history. Cleopatra understood that aligning with Caesar could secure her rule, and Caesar saw in Cleopatra both a valuable ally and a symbol of legitimacy in the ancient world. Their union produced a child, Caesarion, and though his future would be contested, the liaison underscored Caesar's role as not merely a Roman figure but a Mediterranean one. The Egyptian campaign culminated in Caesar's victory over Ptolemy's forces, ensuring Cleopatra's dominance. Rome now had Egypt as a powerful client state, with all its wealth and grain supplies. For Caesar, this was not just a personal triumph, but a strategic one, strengthening his hand for the battles yet to come. Campaigns in Africa and Spain. The death of Pompey did not end resistance. In Africa, remnants of the Senate's forces regrouped, led by Cato the Younger and Metellus Scipio, fiercely committed to the Republic's traditions. Cato refused to surrender to Caesar. At the Battle of Thapsus in 46 BC, Caesar's legions crushed the resistance. Cato, unwilling to live under Caesar's rule, took his own life, becoming a martyr for Republican ideals. His suicide symbolized the death of the Republic as much as Caesar's victories symbolized its transformation. Spain, too, became a theater of resistance. Pompey's sons, Gnaeus and Sextus, rallied supporters in Hispania. At the Battle of Munda in 45 BC, Caesar faced one of his most difficult challenges. The fighting was brutal, the outcome uncertain. Yet once again, Caesar's tactical genius prevailed. His enemies were slain or fled, and with Munda's victory, the last serious opposition to Caesar evaporated. Now, Rome belonged to him, Caesar as dictator. Returning to Rome, Caesar did not dismantle the Republic outright, but he reshaped it to his will. He accepted the title of Dictator Perpetuoed, dictator for life. Though this title alarmed many, Caesar presented himself not as a tyrant but as a reformer. He launched ambitious programs to address Rome's chronic problems: debt relief, easing the financial burdens of citizens; calendar reform, introducing the Julian calendar, whose influence remains in the modern calendar we use today; expansion of citizenship, extending rights to communities beyond Italy; urban planning, revitalizing Rome with new buildings, infrastructure, and public works. To his supporters, Caesar was a visionary leader, correcting centuries of dysfunction. To his enemies, he was a monarch in all but name. The Senate, stripped of real power, still existed, but it was increasingly a ceremonial body. Senators who opposed Caesar risked irrelevance or worse, while Caesar was generous in clemency, pardoning many who had fought against him. Suspicion lingered. Rome's aristocracy feared that Caesar's dominance meant the end of their political influence. The Ides of March. That fear reached its breaking point on the Ides of March, 44 BC, as Caesar entered the theater of Pompey. Conspirators surrounded him. Senators, some of whom had once benefited from his mercy, drew their daggers and struck. Et brute, whether spoken or not, became the most famous words associated with betrayal. Caesar fell beneath a hail of blows, stabbed 23 times. His blood stained the Senate floor. The man who had crossed the Rubicon, conquered Gaul, defeated Pompey, and reshaped Rome, died not on the battlefield, but at the hands of supposed allies. His assassination was intended to restore the Republic. Instead, it plunged Rome into further chaos. Power struggles erupted, alliances shifted, and civil wars reignited. Ultimately, it was not the Senate, but Caesar's heir Octavian, later Augustus, who would inherit the mantle of power. The legacy of Caesar and the Civil War. The crossing of the Rubicon was a moment of defiance, but its consequences extended far beyond Caesar's lifetime. By challenging the Senate and seizing power through military force, Caesar shattered the Republic's fragile balance. His assassination did not save the old order. It only accelerated its demise. Rome would never again be the Republic of old. Instead, Caesar's adopted son Augustus would complete the transformation, establishing the Roman Empire. What began with a single step across a river ended with the birth of an imperial system that would dominate Europe and the Mediterranean for centuries. Reflections on the crossing. Why does the crossing of the Rubicon remain one of history's most iconic moments? Because it embodies the tension between law and ambition, tradition and change, caution and boldness. Caesar could have obeyed the Senate, relinquished his command, and faded into obscurity. Instead, he chose risk, believing that fortune favored the bold. His choice reshaped history. The phrase "crossing the Rubicon" entered language as a metaphor for irreversible decisions. It reminds us that history often pivots on the courage or recklessness of individuals who defy convention. As we reflect on Caesar's march into destiny, we see both triumph and tragedy. His vision, leadership, and reforms changed Rome forever. Yet his ambition destroyed the very republic he claimed to protect. The Rubicon was not simply a river. It was the boundary between republic and empire, between the collective governance of the Senate and the singular power of one man. Caesar's story forces us to ask timeless questions. What price are we willing to pay for stability? Can ambition coexist with democracy? And when individuals wield too much power, can institutions survive? The answer, at least for Rome, was clear. The Republic died so that the empire might live. And it all began on that cold morning when Julius Caesar stepped into the waters of the Rubicon, never to turn back.